Okay, it's 1 o'clock. Can we get a show of hands from our members to ensure that they're back? Just a few minutes, maybe, for everyone.
Doing a quick sound check. You can hear me. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes,
Perfect. Thank
Lisa.
you.
Thank you. Let's give everyone a minute. Well, welcome back. Hopefully, everyone had a good lunch. For our first work group update from the Pesticide Label Reform Work Group, we will hear from Lisa Dreilinger with Arxada, Sarah Hovinga with Bayer, and Michelle Arling with the Office of Pesticide Programs. We are also joined by guest speakers, Bill Chisholm and Stanley Culpepper from the Weed Science Society of America. Welcome. And before we get started, just a reminder to speak slowly for the translators.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I can't, I see Sarah. I don't see Michelle. There, nope.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. There's Michelle. Awesome. So we just wanted to welcome everybody to the PPDC Label Reform Work Group. I'm going to say thank you to both Sarah and Michelle. They have been amazing to co-lead this work group with. They have both done an amazing job. And a special thank you to the entire work group, which we will get to in a second, but it has been an awesome 2 years co-leading this group. And we are very excited to share the output with all of you. So off to Michelle.
Thanks, Lisa. Lisa has been an excellent co-chair as well. She's for so we're gonna move on to next slide. Okay. So we're hoping to go over most of the slides that we've already shared with you, just as a refresher, in anticipation of discussion of the final report, which we sent to you for consideration. And so I'll kick it off by talking about the amazing members that Lisa mentioned. So this is the entirety of the people who participated in our work group over the long 2-year process, where we met weekly for an hour and had incredible dedication and commitment towards progress. We covered a ton of topics, and I don't think we could have done it if we didn't have the expertise and experience and willingness of all of these people to share their knowledge and thoughts with us. You can see that there's a really broad representation from industry to NGOs, government, state government, tribes, equipment manufacturers. We had a range of perspectives, and that contributed to the overall success. So the charge questions for the work group, I'll go over really quickly, but overall our goal was just to develop recommendations around efficiency in reviewing and approving labeling, improving the quality and consistency of labeling, and focusing on the adaptability by industry and consumers. And we'll present our answers to the charge questions in the form of our report to the board. You'll see on the bottom, there are parking lot topics. And even though we put some things in the parking lot to start, we did cover most of most of the topics we set out to cover by the end of our work. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. And yeah, definitely echo Lisa has also been a wonderful co-chair, as well as I appreciate the contribution of all of the members on the group. So thank you so much. And diving right in here, so this was presented last year as well, but again, as a refresher, in order to really get into the details and the specific recommendations that the label reform work group wanted to give to EPA, it really made sense to dive into a couple of pesticide examples so we could really get some detail under our wings here. And so things like, what does structure really mean, and really in the short term, developing these templates. And so this is an example of the antimicrobial template, and that was developed as part of the work package. And you'll see here, really going through data elements that were needed for these types of pesticides, in addition to where you could find the guidance, either in the Code of Federal Regulations or in the Label Review Manual, for example, for what actually goes into those data elements, to really start to provide some order and structure to these data pieces that go on to pesticide label information. And so, in the short term, really looking to, for example, on the submission side, really helping the submitter, providing order and transparency around that. And then really on the reviewer side, helping to provide that consistency. And so here's the antimicrobial example. The next slide shows the agricultural product example. And so a very similar exercise was done there as well, in terms of looking at the different data elements that were needed. And then also, it should be noted that for both of these examples, when possible, it was also looked to opportunities for further digitization, since we know that the agency is committed to this and working on several different projects. Ed was mentioning them in the beginning of this PPDC meeting. And so flagging different options for where there could be controlled vocabulary possibilities, data dependencies, et cetera. And interestingly, this work is not digital yet. It's really laying the structure for what could be digital. And so it's really utilizing the subject matter expertise of all of the work group members that are on here, because of course, before you have a digital system, you need to tell the system what to do. So that was really the underlying piece here. And flipping to the next slide, again, getting into the details was really important, and we don't expect you to look at all of these details, but the key piece here being that, even though there are different pesticide types, in this case, using antimicrobial product types and agricultural product types as the examples, there of course are some differences between these pesticide types, but there are commonalities as well. And so this was a promising discovery of this work, in terms of providing what could potentially be the backbone or a backbone of pesticides overall, with, of course, more work and more granularity needed to identify some of those unique pieces there. And Ed discussed at the beginning of this meeting, for example, 2025 goals, coordinating with industry associations on some of this work. And so I just wanted to highlight that ties in. This could be a specific example of that, for example, where working with some of these industry associations could be a mechanism for further leveraging what granularity is needed based on the pesticide type. So I think that was it for the work products on those specific structures. If you go to the next slide, we also know, that in the agency's commitment to digital, and also commitment to stakeholders all along the label life cycle, if you will, and including leveraging the great expertise that we had on the group, we wanted to make sure to at least capture at a very high level what could be the optimal electronic experience across a label's life cycle, all the way from submission to EPA, all the way to enforcement in the field. And so we were very fortunate to have a series of workshops with our label reform working group and leveraging the expertise that we had from all of the different stakeholders that Michelle was talking about to go through each one of these stages to really list out what would be the optimal experience. So as the agency is going through the digital transformation, some of these pieces can be considered for further along the chain. And so that's what you see here. And again, this was presented last year. But if you go to the next slide, we worked through all of these different steps and overall really identified that, you know, the data does need to be in this findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable way. And so, you know, starting with a structure is really the foundation of that. And so I think that ties into some of the detailed work that the group had done. You know, this type of work does take dedication. It takes the subject matter expertise, and including resourcing for projects like this. You know, we talked about the importance of structure in both the authoring, but also in enabling this sort of information to be interoperable with different platforms or applications. You know, structure is the basis of AI, for example. And so thinking about how important it is to the fundamentals of any IT system. Really looking at it initially for a voluntary approach because we really want to incentivize users to adopt these digital approaches. We want to make sure that there's benefit there and to be inclusive to all stakeholders based on their digital competencies. And so making sure to be inclusive to all stakeholders. And again, encouraging the adoption by different incentives. And so we were listing some different opportunities there connected to PRIA, for example, and also harmonizing as much as possible. So digitization and digital labels and things along those lines are only happening here in the US, but also around the world. And if you think of, you know, global systems of global trade, et cetera, trying to harmonize as much as possible and not reinvent the wheel, so to say, if there's other initiatives that we can leverage the work from. So that was also a recommendation. And then, of course, you know, continuing to align with stakeholder needs and requirements. So hopefully that last exercise that we showed was helpful for that. So I think this is the last slide I'm talking about, and I'll hand it over to Lisa.
Thanks, Sarah. So our short-term recommendations are, as Sarah just highlighted, a structured labeling approach. Of course, the first step would be voluntary, and it would improve label creation, review, and comprehension by all the stakeholders that we highlighted. Most importantly, I would say the EPA and their ability to review and building efficiencies, as Ed spoke about the backlog. We think this is one way that we would be able to improve that with efficiencies. The label review work group, of course, highlighted core data elements, which the regulatory sources where it came from, the feasibility of pick lists. In some cases, we even created the pick lists. So there is going to be a log of the pick lists, I believe, on the PPDC website when we are done as a list to go back and reference in the future if it is helpful. And of course, we need it to be interoperable with the databases that the agency is using and that some of the state and tribal other stakeholders, and of course, registrants. So there's obviously the interoperability of the system and the label templates are key. And then Sarah highlighted the crossovers and the places where the antimicrobial and the conventional structured labeling do line up. And in a lot of cases, there is a lot of overlap. In the example that we showed so far, the conventional had way more detail in their outline, but the overarching data elements are the same. Just to point that out. Of course, we need to continue evaluating other pesticides. We need to continue to refine our controlled vocabularies, our standard phrases, and of course, we really need to start piloting structured labeling, because the more that we submit structured labeling, the more we will learn about what is working and what is not working and what refinements need to be made in the future. So we are hoping that these structured labeling templates will be on a central location. What that central location is beyond the PPDC website, we're not sure. Maybe the label review manual, but there's other places where they could live as well. So we're just working out where that might be. Of course, the templates are going to change over time as we determine what is and isn't working. So we're going to need to maintain these templates and then need them to be living somewhere where registrants can access them. And then the goal is, of course, faster submissions, improved accuracy, and easier comprehension for stakeholders, as we said before. And we are also hoping that this will encourage further efficiencies like placeholders for QR codes and websites that would make some flexibilities that are, and I know Sarah showed from the beginning of the from the beginning of the process to the end of the process and everything in between. We're hoping to build efficiencies and speed up all the different the time it takes to travel through each of those individual boxes across the business. Next slide, please. So our longer term recommendations are to take, I think we can all agree that the structured digital labeling is key, but it's not just the label, right? The information that goes on the label is coming from somewhere. So we want to make sure that we are taking our document-centric approach to a data-centric approach, meaning that the data would be pulled and create the label almost some sort of automatically, and that the EPA would be able to capture and communicate label elements as digital data instead of manually inputting the data into the label. And I'm not going to repeat all the little bullets, but basically it's exactly what Sarah and Michelle and I have already said in terms of what was accomplished with the structured digital labeling template that we have proposed. It is key that we continue to collaborate with states and tribes. If it doesn't work for the people who are using the labels and using those labels to make decisions about what can and cannot be registered in their regions, then we have not our job successfully, just say. So we need to really make sure that it works for all of the key stakeholders. And then the system needs to, of course, incorporate workflow definitions, and then there are some that are processes that are still done by humans, and then some that we're hoping to automate. And of course, again, we need to make sure it works within the systems that we are going to operate in. And then we're hoping to continue to build efficiencies and to have some of the processes that are being buzzword and everyone's talking about, but we're really hoping that we can continue to build efficiencies in AI. And we're hoping that this is the first step, and because if the data is structured and easy to follow, AI will have an easier time in comparing it. So next slide. So with that, those are our short and our long-term those are our short-term and long-term recommendations. We just wanted to highlight some agency advancements. And Michelle, I'm not sure if you were supposed to do this slide or not.
I'm happy to if you want me to.
Yeah.
I think it's for you.
We can tag team it, but basically the EPA has registered a product that used the new structured label, and I believe it added efficiencies, and it's a step in the right direction towards where we're trying to get to. So that is real progress. And of course, there's also MyPest, which has been amazing to watch roll out and see the value that it's adding to the registrants community and to the agency, of course, right? It's creating this two-way ability to communicate, and really you can see the efficiencies, and I know Ed shared the progress that's being made in the backlog, and I'm sure that my pest is definitely contributing to that. So we're hoping to continue to build to build that momentum and continue to make improvements on my pest, and then how it will intermingle with all the work that this group has done. Michelle, you have anything to add?
No, I think just that we'll hear a little bit more about the development and approval of that structured label specifically from Bill Chisholm and Stanley Culpepper right after our presentation. They'll talk about how they did it and how it was a great, easy process, hopefully.
Oh, awesome. So our next steps here. So this group has, as Michelle said, met every week for, I mean, at least 18 months. I would say maybe we met a little less in this past 6 months as we were pulling the report together, because we wanted to be really careful of the group's time and respectful. But there's so much hard work that went in with a lot of amazing output. So a big thank you to this group. The passion and the knowledge sharing and the ability to really have this amazing output could not have been done without each and every member of this group. And I'm thankful to have been a part of it. So it's been really, really eye-opening and a really good learning experience. That said, we think it's time, as it is a PPDC work group. We have made our recommendations for the charge questions that were set out before us. Our recommendation would be to sunset this group. And then our second recommendation would be to create a new working group where the charge questions would be surrounding providing value to EPA during its registration digitalization implementation. So while my pest is getting up to speed and all the other digitalization that is happening in the agency as it works more with AI, and of course how it works with structured labeling and where it can be used and how it can be applied. So yeah, in short, the recommendation is going to be to sunset this group and create a new one with different charge questions. And we think that this is the best way to move forward to support the overall approach to structured pesticide labeling. So I want to just make sure that Sarah or Michelle don't have anything else to add before we pass it back to either questions or to the next presentation and take questions at the end.
Nothing more to add from my side.
No, me either. Great job.
Yep, great job.
Okay, we'll have some time for discussion now.
Okay.
Please raise your hand and ask any questions or provide any input, and then we'll Lisa, was there a report too
Yeah,
that you guys are putting forward to send
Yeah.
to the agency? That would be the other thing I would mention, is like we could vote on that.
It's been sent. I think it was sent in the beginning of April, and I think it's been distributed to the PPDC members, and they should have been able to review before this meeting.
Right.
And hopefully people have reviewed it and can keep that in mind when we get to the voting later. I don't see any hands, so I'm not sure if there are any comments or questions. Kim.
Well, I'll just say a little bit because doesn't look like anybody else is raising their hand, but this has been a great group to work on. And when I've talked to other folks, when I'm out in the field, I feel like we've really laid a good foundation to truly move forward with digital and structural labeling. So thank y'all for everything that this committee has done, and I've enjoyed serving on it so far. So I hope everybody else reviewed the document, but it was very thorough, and thank you guys.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Kim, for being such an engaged member of the group.
I think we can pass it on to the next presentation, and then we can come back, of course, at the end if there is anyone else that wants to have a question or make a comment.
Thank you. We can move on to Bill and Stanley. Bill, Stanley, are you guys there?
Yes, sorry, I'm trying to share my screen.
Okay.
Can you see the screen?
No, just you. Oh, yep, it's coming.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Stanley, are you
Yep, I'm
okay
good,
here?
Bill. Yep.
Perfect.
Hi, everybody. My name's Stanley Culpepper. I'm a past president of the Weed Science Society of America. I'm also a weed scientist at the University of Georgia, and I'm from a bicentennial family farm. And I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Bill Chisholm, who is our Weed Science Society of America Endangered Species Act committee chair, and also, as most of you know, retired EPA scientist. And we certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here with you for just a few minutes. We're going to tag team and we're going to share our society's goals and efforts on improving pesticide label communication. Bill, you can go to the next slide. So about 2 years ago, we invited 13 additional weed scientists to join a committee. And again, that committee, our overall objective is improving pesticide label communication. And we strategically selected these individuals because of what we do. These individuals are focused heavily in extension, which means we all develop pest management recommendations for our states, but we also spend a lot of time vocally sharing pest management recommendations to growers, consultants, extension, etc. Just to give you an example, I spend about 4 weeks a year reviewing labels. Each of these scientists probably review 100 or more pesticide labels each year, and then I take that information and I share it through thousands and thousands of recommendations. So we were blessed and fortunate to have each of these individuals partake and participate in our overall objective. Now, Bill, you can go to the next slide. We actually began the process by asking our scientists to help us understand, without biasing them, help us understand what makes a great label in their definition, not ours, in their definition. And then what makes a label really, really difficult to understand, to interpret, challenging to take that information and help the end user use the product the best way possible. And through that process, we were really fortunate to have everyone provide a tremendous amount of information. I think it took Bill and myself nearly a month to pull that information together. And the one collective theme, there are a lot of sub bullets, but the one collective theme is we felt we needed uniform labeled structures that would facilitate our ability to find the information, interpret the information, and take that information and communicate it effectively to the end user. Now, after Bill and I pulled all the information from our weed scientists together, we were then blessed with the opportunity to get to visit with 5 different industry partners to obtain feedback from them on our ideas and our thoughts. It was an extremely beneficial and learning process, I think, both ways. So it wasn't just the weed scientists, it was weed scientists then meet with the industry partners to get their ideas. And then we had the opportunity to provide comments to the US EPA. I know it's never good to highlight specific people because we had so many people help us, but I do want to specifically highlight the input, the impact, the guidance, the assistance from Lindsay Rowe at the US EPA and Charlotte Sanson at ADAMA. And Bill explained more about the relationship with ADAMA in just a minute. All right, Bill, next slide. This is my last slide, and I'll share with you. So our ultimate goal was how do we develop a uniform structured label? And if you know a weed scientist, you know the weed scientists will take the time and share their thoughts. And we were blessed with that information. And you see here, there's 7 different bullets. These 7 bullets were consistent across all of us. I was one of the weed scientists that provided my thoughts, and I'll just highlight them. But more importantly, Bill's going to give you some examples of how we think that we can take these ideas, translate them into a label to help the end user, the farmer, the applicator, the consultant interpret the information more effectively, more efficiently, make us better at what we do. Number one, across the board for all of our scientists, we want a table of contents, an in-depth label of contents. This is really the core of how we can find information consistently, effectively across labels. It is very difficult now. We may be comfortable with one manufacturer's labels. When we move to another manufacturer's, it's completely different, and it's an absolute nightmare, and a lot of our growers get frustrated and leave the process. Number two, on the cover page or close to the cover page, there's certain pieces of information that would help us so much. In fact, this would probably reduce the time I spend on labels by 50%. It's a huge deal to have specific information available at an easy to find place. Tables, we like tables. We do not like text. We have to write for weed science and weed tech. We do not like text. We like the tables. It is easier to interpret. It is easier to communicate. And we have a greater opportunity of having extension consultants and the applicators actually take the time to review that information. We like individual crops, not just crop groups. I work in produce. You do cucurbits, you do fruiting vegetables. It gets really, really complicated. So we really like to have individual crops. We need better information on tank mixes. There's no doubt in the world of resistance management, tank mixes are very important in a sustainable systems approach. And this is something that we felt we need better information about. We need, again, format, all labels, same font, table format, general layout. We would love for our industry partners to come to the table to bring us uniformity in a structured label approach. And then again, the input is designed with the Endangered Species Act and the new information that's going to be provided on those labels as we move to the electronic process. Bill, I'm going to pass it to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Stanley. And we're going to build on the presentation from Lisa, Sarah, and Michelle and go from there. So this is an example of our structure. And in a minute, I'm going to go into the Metamitron label because we've already showed our structure before. Just some basic information on the cover page. The mode of action group, we were recommending that it be color coded so that you could look at the label and know the jug you have is an insecticide, herbicide, or fungicide. We would like the labeled crops on the front. If it's too many crops to put on that, just tell us what section to go to so we can easily find that. The reentry interval should be on the front, and if it's too big, you should put the section number it would be found on. Just some general information that Stanley was saying. One of the things everybody pointed out was it's really hard to tell if you have the current label. We would really like the label approval date on the front. I realize that's not the state approval date, but at least the one that went to OPP, so you can tell if you've got an old label or not. It's really hard to tell. Just a table of contents from Brevis, the fruit thinner from Adama. Main categories here. So you can easily say, okay, I've got a question about user safety. To go to section 2. I've got a spray drift question, to go to section 5. Under section 5, you might be wondering about droplet size. You would go to 5.3. So a uniform structure would be really important. But as Stanley says, just having a table of content on all these labels would be so helpful. Some example tables, user safety recommendations, the table on the top, 2.3. 3.0 is environmental hazards. And we realize some information is really very simple. It may be only 1 or 2 sentences, and it really doesn't need to be in a table. So for example, 4.0 is physical or chemical hazards, and none were identified. So we just have a statement to that effect. This is directions for use. One of the things we're advocating And number 6.1 is just product information, just a short paragraph explaining what this product is. Oh my God, there's thousands, as you all know, there's thousands of formulations out there. There's hundreds of active ingredients. Just a little reminder what this active ingredient does. I think you could read this and know if you've got the correct one, and just a short reminder how it works. 6.2 is active ingredient conversion chart with ESA looking at pounds of active ingredient applied per year. That's incredibly important. If you have a premix with 2 or 3 active ingredients in it, you would have the amount of active ingredient for all 3 of those active ingredients. Just there's no way for that poor user to tell how much he's applying without that. The use sites, in this case, it's apples and pears. Some spray drift management. So 5.1 is mandatory spray drift. This is an air blast application. If it has 3 periods, that means there's multiple bullet points for all these. I just wanted to point out in 5.7, boom height above the target, not applicable. So in some cases, there's common things you would go to look to a label, and it may not be applicable. Well, I think in a lot of cases, you could just say that, and there's ways to shorten that up just so the user stops looking. A lot of times I go to labels and I try and find something and it's not there, and I just keep looking and looking, and it may never be there. So it would be nice to tell users that it's not applicable. Under application rate, all the information so you can make a crop decision would be together under the application rate. This gives the application rate. For apples west of the Rockies, it's 16 to 48 fluid ounces. It also gives the maximum rate. So under application rate restrictions, 96 fluid ounces is the annual maximum application rate. Next to it's the minimum application intervals and the pre-harvest intervals. This is a perennial crop, so replant interval is not listed, but if you had an annual crop or you were worried about how many days do I have to give before I can plant the next crop, it would be found on this table as well. And again, there's some cases where a short statement may be all that's needed. Resistance management and integrated pest management, not applicable as a plant growth regulator. Stanley mentioned mixing instructions. Oh my goodness, with so many tank mixes with so many active ingredients in it, it's really important to be very specific about how to mix your product and how to get it consistently mixed. So we think we need to do a better job of that and make it a stepwise process. And then my last slide is things that weren't applicable on a fruit thinner label, but could be on others. As I said, a conversion table. If it's a premix, all the compounds should be listed. Crop rotations. If you have common crops that are rotated after your application, they should be listed, and any rotational intervals should be listed. Application directions. We think there should be a separate application table for each type of equipment. So if it's a ground application, an aerial application, an air blast, each of those should have basic information so the user can go to his type of application and get that information and not have to go through masses of information to try and find it. Endangered species requirements, that's coming up more and more. Spray drift or runoff should be listed on the label. We're really concerned that if it's not listed on the labels, users may not go to the EPA website to check. For example, 13.0 may be where you tell them to go and see Bulletins Live 2. And we need to clearly specify if the user needs to go to Bulletins Live 2 or the mitigation menu. And then the last one is directions for use. Typically, we would also suggest that it include grazing restrictions. So if you have restrictions on how the grain, forage, hay, pastures restrictions, they should be listed on that table too with the directions for use. That's all I have. Questions or comments?
Please raise your hand if you'd like to comment. Or ask a question. Brian.
Hi there. Great presentation. I really appreciate the you sharing that. I was just curious if there was if any discussion has come up about labeling in terms of, when you look at a label, there's obviously a lot of information on there. Um, but when you really look at it, it you know, a lot of it, or at least a large chunk of it, it is what I would call explaining. Um, it's information that's relevant, but it's not directly applicable to applying the product. And here's the example that I've sort of realized is, on some of the product labels for like dicamba or 2,4-D, there'll be this inversion uh, statement: "Do not apply during an inversion." But then it explains what an inversion is. And I wonder if there's been discussion of like taking that information off the label and putting it on a different document. Not saying it's not important, but it really can kind of clutter up the label and make it much longer than maybe it needs to be. And I guess the analogy I use is maybe like when you get a prescription drug, you have very detailed, information on how to take that drug on the product itself, and then you get from the pharmacy this big packet of additional information. And I'm just curious if anything like that has been discussed, or things like that. But I do appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
No, that's a great point from our point of view. I think that if we make the transition to electronic labels, you could just click on that word or term and get sent there. Uh, with so many labels being dependent on, you have to have the information on the label. I don't think we're quite there yet, though. That's a good
Okay.
point.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so the only thing I would add, Brian, is, that's kind of what me and my colleagues do, right? We try to take that 30, 40, 50 page label and we try to make it something that's simple and understandable, right? Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's simply not going to work. But Bill's exactly right. In the future, if I'm doing soybean weed control with dicamba, I want to put soybeans and dicamba, and the things that are pertinent to that are the only things that pop up. And if I don't know what inversion means, just like the calculator now with ESA, right? If you don't know what strip till is, you click it and it defines strip till, and Ed's going to have us a video where you can see what strip till is. I think that's the ultimate dream. But we have to have our industry partners come together and say, look, this is a good idea. Let's do a unified label structure. And I know it's good for the EPA. I know it's good for that. But I'm thinking about, my dad on the farm, our farm, other farms, and we work really hard to try to get these individuals to read and interpret these labels. But at times, on some labels, some are good and some are not so good. That's something that we've got to overcome. And this is one way we could really overcome things quite quickly, I believe.
Yeah, I would completely agree. That is great. Is the as simple as we can make it, the more successful we'll all be. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, and just so you know, so somebody like me, I'll take dozens and dozens of products, and I'll build a program, a prescription. I call it prescription. We're in the world now of prescription weed management. I'll tell my growers exactly what to do, what rate, when to apply, how to apply. I'll even tell you how many days after you plant it, when to apply, right, based on the biology of the plant. So they're all these things that we can do, but the key of the whole system is being able to interpret the label, right? So we need to be able to interpret that label from people like me all the way down to whoever's applying a pesticide right now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely right. And you know, we as state regulators, we struggle with interpreting
Yep.
those
Yep.
labels. And we
Absolutely.
deal with this every day. That's, you know, a large chunk of what we deal with. So yeah, no, great
Agreed.
comments.
Agreed.
Great
Yep.
comments.
No.
Yeah.
Yep. Good point.
Daniel?
Dan,
Uh, yes, I was going to make two comments. One was going to follow up, but basically what was just talked about. I think as we start to get to more of the internet-based labels like Bulletins Live 2, other endangered species mitigations, having further clarification of definitions like inversions, like whatever, it would be great to have that. You could put that off the label to make the label easier to digest. And then when you need that additional information, you know right where to go. It's a little tricky to perhaps implement right now, I agree. But I just also wanted to say I really, really like the idea of a structured kind of table of contents. And my thought was everything would be kind of kept in the same numbering system. So for example, your reentry period, it's always going to be, you know, bullet point number, whatever it was, like 5. So then as I'm looking at a label, I can tell my staff for your reentry, go to number 5, and that's going to give you your time. So it would make getting through a very long label very easy if you always know where's my drift management for this product. It's in bullet point 12, so you go to 12. And if even if it's not applicable, I agree with that. I love that idea. 12 drift management not applicable, and you just move on, something like that. So you know you found the right spot on the label. It's not there, and then you don't have to continue to Google and look and ask questions, and you know it's there. But I really like that structured table of contents. I just wanted to throw that out.
That is exactly our goal, right? And I'll give you an example from me. My nightmare is carryover. I work about 45 different crops, agronomic, horticultural, right? You go on to some of these labels and you try to figure out when to plant a cucumber behind metribuzin or something like that, right? I'm still looking. I'm 20 years into looking for that one, right? But if I knew number 8.0 or whatever the number is, you know, Bill and I, we want to work with everybody to make it flow the best we can. But if every consultant, every applicator, everybody in extension, even in industry know that number 8.0 is always carryover, oh
Right.
my gosh, oh my
Right.
gosh, it would
It
be
would be
unbelievable.
it would be super easy for everybody. It would be the best thing. I agree with you. And I also I love the ounce per acre conversion to pounds active ingredient per acre, because that's not necessarily simple math. And I probably get that question more than just about anything. So yeah.
Well, you know, I think it's important to keep in mind, and I'm biased because I'm from a farm, and farmers are the smartest people in the world. But you know what? When you don't do those mathematical equations quite often, and you're sitting on the tractor at the end of the field,
You
and it's going to rain in 3 hours, and you want to calculate something, it's impossible. And we don't need to
I
put them
agree.
in that situation because that's when
I
mistakes
agree.
occur.
I completely agree. Thanks.
David,
David?
Yeah, hey, thank you for putting that. That was an interesting presentation. Uh, two things to say. One, you know, I would say I've gone through the Bulletin Live. Two, we've had a person come out and run through hold some workshops where they have a cross section of all sorts of applicators come and do the workshop, and then they give us actual problems, give us a couple labels, and say work through this, see how you can do it, see if you can do it. It was really eye opening. It uh, gives us real world feedback on how to adjust that label. So I guess I'd recommend that you doing that with these new labels is to bring them out and have them looked at by actual applicators, a whole cross section to come up with a version everybody can understand. The other thing I would say would be, you know, you work at a university, talk to someone in the communications department, because again, we're living in our own kind of silo as far as technically. And so having someone maybe in communications that would develop, uh, you know, language or approaches that would be more easily understood, you know, kind of the Sesame Street approach to labels may be helpful. So those are my two comments.
I actually think they're phenomenal ideas. I have about 120 county agents across the state. We're really blessed. So I have taken Bill's stuff and I do run that by them and I do get input. But your idea on communication, Bill, I see Bill writing it down. That is something we have not. We've always talked about. We need to develop an approach that we have. You know, a lot of times labels try to say the same thing, but they say it differently. They use different terminology, and you get really confused. So again, if we can have consistency of terminology, that would be something. But that is a great idea. Thank you so much, Bill. I don't know if you want to add that. I know you're writing that down. That's something we definitely should do.
Yep.
Neely?
I was very surprised and very thankful that you are requesting the table of contents, because the table of contents will, it's you don't have to use magnifying glasses to look at labels. So I commend you for that. It's and I'm very happy. Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you.
You know, the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up. So for 25 years, I said a lot of bad things about people that write labels. But until Bill and I had to write and create our own label, I now take all of that back. So we certainly aren't criticizing the past at all. We're simply trying to be part of a team to make it better. The ultimate goal is to help the farmer, help the applicator, just get the information to them in the simplest, easiest way possible so we can get it right.
Claudia?
Hello. So I have a question about the side effect. So I feel like a lot of people using more and more biological, not necessarily with herbicides, but I was thinking more in the insecticide or fungicides. So you have to go to a specific, let's say, BioBest app and put there the active ingredient or your product name, and then you have to check if you're using any mite or any biological that can be affected. So it would be nice if also that it will be included on the label, like a link that you guys say that. That will make it easier to have all the information in that label. That is my comment.
Thank you.
And I agree with that. And if we can include the table of contents be also in Spanish.
That's an excellent point. To be honest with you, a couple people have presented that, and Stanley and I wanted to make sure companies are willing to do this, but that would absolutely be the next logical place. And the great thing about that is creating that in Spanish would be hopefully very straightforward. I hope.
I can promise you, being from Georgia, I am also completely on board with you guys on the Spanish interpretation. In fact, we're moving all our pesticide training to have both English and Spanish as well. So I concur completely.
Anyone else? Should we move on to the work group voting then?
Yep. I just want to say thanks for inviting us, and we're really happy, and we really appreciate the work PPDC is doing on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill and Sam.
Yeah, thanks. And for the great presentation. And I just want to drive home the point, you know, the reason for the digital transformation, the reason for updating our labels, the reasons for ESA compliance, endocrine, you know, exploring issues. And at the end of the day, having a label that people can read and actually use in the way that we wanted them to use is how we get the environmental benefits and the human health benefits, so that folks are using it the right way. So giving folks these tools, structured label, digital label, Sesame Street label, we'll start to saying that. That's how we get the results we're looking for on the human health and eco side. So thanks for this great both presentations. All right, Jeffrey, I'll leave it to you for the voting.
Great. So Lisa, Michelle, Sarah, chime in if you need, but we're gonna vote to submit their report. So
So
if we
does
can, yep.
anybody want to make a motion?
Am I allowed to
Including
make
folks
a motion on my own?
yeah, you're on the PPDC. I might, I mean, Amy's probably gonna help you out. I don't know. We'll see. She's also.
That's fine.
Yeah. Anybody want to make a motion for the label work group report to be submitted to the agency?
I'll move.
Kim, thanks, Kim. Second.
I'll second.
Thanks, Bob. All right, all in favor. What are we doing? Thumbs up?
No, raise your hand, please.
Raise your hand and then
keep them
and then
up.
Jeffrey will keep them up. Jeffrey will count and he'll let you know when we're done.
Yep, just leave them up. And your hand's up, right, Ed?
Oh, you get to vote? Yes,
Yeah.
my hand is up.
Okay. Yep, 29 then? 29 out of 31.
Okay, the motion passes. And then dissolving the group. Jeffrey, I don't know, do we need any voting around that, or we just sort of accept that, or do we want to have that go through a motion for official purposes? I'll leave it to you as the DFO.
Let's just do it. If you guys can do it really quickly.
Okay.
Yep. Vote to sunset.
Somebody want to make a motion to sunset this working group on the digital label work group?
I make the motion.
Gina, thanks, Gina. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Lygia.
Lygia, thank you. And all in favor, raise your hand.
Yep.
My hand is up too.
Okay. Okay.
I didn't put it up. I'm putting it up in my video.
27, 28, 28, 29. 29. 29. Perfect. Thank you,
Okay.
guys.
The motion passes. Thank you.
And now we want to form a new work group, right, Lisa?
Yeah, so the motion would be to form a new work group to work on supporting the EPA and adding value on their digitalization journey.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Wendy Sue, thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Mm-hmm. $27.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Motion passes.
Right.
And then we'll need a co-chair, and then the agency will determine whether we're going to support it with our own co-chair as the next step.
Okay.
So you can.
Yeah,
we don't need to vote on that, but yeah.
Yeah, the idea was that Sarah and I would stay for continuity unless there were objections. And obviously you have to decide if Michelle can stay or not. We're obviously hoping that she will be allowed to assist us. And then I will encourage those that want to be involved to please reach out.
And they can reach out to Jeffrey and CC you, Lisa.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. What a great presentation, great topic, and look forward to digesting the report as an agency.
Gina and Emma, are those legacy hands? Legacy hands? Probably. Okay. Yep. Great. Our next session is at 2:05, so you guys have a few minutes. Thank you.
Thanks. See you at 2:05.
Great. It's 2:05. Can we get a hands up of our members? Make sure they're back. Great. I'll give everyone a few seconds. Great. Let's now pivot for an update from the Farm Worker Work Group. For that, we are joined by Mili Trevino Saceda from Alianza Nacional de Campesinas and Lauren Lapointe from OPP. Welcome. Mili, do you want me to share the slides?
Yes, please.
Okay, give me a second, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep. We don't need that. That's a little bit. 1 second.
But I do need the list of everything.
Okay, sharing. Great. Okay, are you guys seeing this now?
No, not yet. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as I had mentioned before, I'm Mili Treviño Salceda, and I'm one of the two co-facilitators with Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. You did a lot of great work helping us and being very patient in terms of helping us put together the presentation. It's the Farmaker Work Group, and the update that we have. I'd like to present the group names, which is in the next one. And I want to also thank Campesinos Sin Fronteras for this. If we go back to the previous, I'm sorry, to the previous picture, it's Campesinos Sin Fronteras was the one that provided a copy of this. Thank you, Emma, of how, workers. And I know that let's go ahead with the next one. I know that some people that are part of the PPDC have a very good knowledge about farm workers in general, either migrant or seasonal. At the same time, there might be some people that might not have a clear picture of what goes on with farm workers in the sphere of being essential workers here in the United States. It's very important that this group can, hopefully, if we have to sunset, continue building another group representing farm workers as a working group. But we have this amazing group that has a lot of knowledge based on their own research, their own work related or directly working with farm workers, or some of us like Emma and myself that have been done this work from a very, very young age. As you all might know, or if you don't, in working in the fields, talking about child labor, there's still the permission of or allowance of children from the age of 12 be able to continue, be able to work in the fields. During my time, I was 8 years old, and I started working in the fields. And I think Emma was a little bit older. I mean, we met, like 30 years ago. It wasn't when we were children, but so we understand, and this is why we're very much and wanting to be part of this PPDC and wanting to be specifically part of this working group. But thank you, Alana. I'm just going to say the first names because I'm more acquainted with. Alana, Becca, Nathan, Alexis, Joseph, Lauren, coming new, but caught up to speed and has been very, very good in terms of helping us. Michelle, Alexis, Temkin, and Alexis Guild, and of course, Emma, myself, and Brian. Thank you so much for putting all this time and effort and raising the important issues about farm workers and for supporting us. And I will say us. It doesn't matter if have not been doing farm work for the last like 30 some years, but believe me, it's part of my principles, how I grew up and understood working the land, understanding how to work with dirt, how to work with plants, everything else. So thank you so much. Can we go to the next one? And here, in terms of, I'm going to be very, very, I'm going to try to, I talk a lot. And of course, if I talk Spanish, it's worse. But I'm going to try to summarize here in terms of, farm workers being seasonal or migrant are also individuals that, because you're working in agriculture, you're not only harvesting, you're planting, you're cultivating, you're doing all sorts of work to make sure that there's a whole, the whole process when you're getting ready to harvest that the fruits or the vegetables that you're working with are have gone through the process at the right time and everything else, because when you're harvesting, you don't just go once, you have to go several times, and through the whole crop. And at the same time, there's not only fruits and vegetables, there's a lot of work done with animals. This is why the farms, the ranchers, and there's a lot more. And if you see 2009 information here, is because there's very few information that has been done in terms of surveys or research about farm workers. Not as much, and but at least we wanted to give you an idea. There is still an average of age of 39. Very interesting. We still have workers that are over their 60s because many, as you will see here, are workers that, because they're not authorized to work in the United States, it's a 42% that is said here. I know that they cannot, and they will not even try to get any kind of Social Security or anything like that. So people continue working. And there's always a census, and at least from 2022, we do have a good amount, where 2.18 million have farm workers, which, as it says here, 23% of all farms are here. At 23% of all the farms and are farm, workers are working in there. Sorry, I'm just kind of tired in terms of many other things because I was going on with the government. Anyway, 1.5 million unpaid laborers on US, which means it's 33% of all farms, is 1.5 million of unpaid laborers on US farms. What does that mean? What does all this means? It means that there's a lot of disparities. There's a lot of different issues that are happening, and we're not going to go there, but at least we wanted you to have a good idea about farm workers and issues. It's not just the pesticides issues, it's many other things that happen. We have been finding out because of a project, we have been finding out there's a good number of farmers, a good number of employers that are socially responsible. And but too bad that not everybody's socially responsible. But nonetheless, because of that, the ones that are socially responsible can provide health health plans or health insurance, and or provide sick time if workers get either sick or injured. Can we go to the next, please? Thank you. As we were saying, agricultural workers are at increased risk of acute pesticide poisonings in comparison to non-agricultural workers, particularly through draft. Early reentry is part of many of the issues where we have been finding out that either crew leaders or supervisors, or either they are not fully aware in terms of, how to make sure they measure the time in terms of not taking workers into a treated area uh, uh, when it's not the time. Um, um, and this has caused a lot of issues with the health of farm workers. Either the poisoning is, very rapid, or with some, it doesn't happen right away. It might, throughout the day, everybody is different, but throughout the day, people can be sick or get sick, and there might be many consequences. We have also found out that female agricultural workers have a much higher risk and issues, and it has to do with because we're able to produce, and in this case, their children. And when you're pregnant, and you're exposed, many things can happen to your womb, and at the same time, if this is a continuance during and keep working, and you're exposed to the chemicals, it has caused many consequences. We have many members within our 18 member organizations that we have found that have children with a lot of disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, and we can go by whatever research, but our organization has a lot of testimonies, and we have seen the issues that farm workers are facing all the time, and farm worker families and their children are facing. If it doesn't happen as the child is being developed within your womb, it happens many more times if you're living in an area that is mostly agriculture, and the exposure is highly. So can we go to the next, please? Thank you. So all of us that are part of this working group are very much aware, and there's a lot more. And I think Joe could have done a better job than me in terms of giving the explanation. He's done a lot of, he knows how to present. With me, I get very passionate and carried away in terms of feelings and emotions and whatsoever. But nonetheless, we did talk, we did have many conversations when Caitlin was around about how we already had discussed about certain charge questions, and we were able to see and have the following charge questions to present today. So can we go ahead, please? And I'm not going to talk about the previous ones, the charge questions that were presented last year, but I am going to present what we came out with. And yesterday, I think we finally decided on these were going to be the two charge questions. One of them is to articulate recommendations for the Office of Pesticide Program to enhance its statutorily required activities and programs, particularly as it relates to ensuring the effectiveness and efficiency of the worker protection standards for all community stakeholders, including agricultural operators and workers. That's the first charge that we had. And the second one, and I think there will hopefully our members of our working group can add a little bit more in terms of giving a much more explanation on this, but from the first charge question, and because I'm just going to read them right now, it's much easier for me to do that. The second charge question is re-articulate the centrality of farm workers in the continued growth of American agriculture production, and in doing so, make clear the compelling business case for ensuring the effectiveness of statutorily required activities and programs and the cost if not implemented effectively. There's a lot to talk about here, and maybe some of our group members can add a little bit from charge question 1 and charge question 2. I don't know if Joe, Nathan would like to add a little bit more. I know we have very little time, but if you can add a little bit more here, or I'm not sure if Lauren can explain a little bit more, but if anybody, if not, that's fine with me. Nathan?
I can jump in just real quick to add, Neely. Yeah, I think the impetus for changing the charge questions was really to more align the work group with the priorities of the new administration, which are focusing on statutorily required activities. So I think that was really the justification for changing the charge questions, and these questions were sort of designed to more align with those stated goals.
Yeah, thank you.
Millie,
Yeah.
this Emma, if I may.
Yeah.
I just want to add that in the lack of information that we have about the number of farm workers, I think the only available that you presented, or it was presented here, is because of that census that was done in 2022. But I would say that it's misrepresented because thousands of farm workers are being brought into the country through H-2A visas. And although they're not like legal residents per se to be here permanently, they're still legal. So like in my community in Yuma County, we're at the US-Mexico border and they cross every day. So they have to have legal documentation to be able to come and work every day. So I just want to say for those that are not very familiar with farm workers that I truly believe that these essential workers that we depend so much to harvest our fruits and vegetables are not necessarily, 42% of them are undocumented. Not in my community, at least, and I'm pretty sure that that's the same situation in other areas of the country. So that is where the importance of, conducting more, research on these workers. Who are they? Because we know that, they're essential to our food, supply, because we eat every day. We eat fruits and vegetables that are not necessarily, other populations harvesting. So I just wanted to clarify that because I have an issue with that when I see 42% undocumented. That's not what happens in my community here in Arizona. Thank you.
and especially with what's going on with the government right now. So Joe, did you want to add anything?
I didn't want to add anything apart from just simply saying or echoing what Emma has already said, and that is, the characterization of each of the national characterization of the farm worker communities all have their own biases. So whether it's coming from the National Agricultural Workers Survey, which deliberately does not include H-2A workers by design, so that's gonna overrepresent undocumented individuals. The U.S. Census of Agriculture, which is the other main one that was drawn upon, that's all based on self-report from farm owners and operators, where in some cases they've got a real reason not to report everybody who's working for them and what is the standing of the people who are working for them. So that's going to underestimate the undocumented community. And then it's being able to actually count the number of H-2A workers that has increased since the first Trump administration and has stayed elevated since the first Trump administration. That's obviously all legal. They're all in the country legally. So it's a very complex portrait. And so it's really difficult to summarize who are farm workers.
Yes. Thank you. And I think, Lauren, the next.
I think we just wanted to get some feedback on the new charge questions from the group.
Okay. Right.
And like you said, we, hope to have more details worked out, and our group discussed, not totally walking away from everything that was previously done, but reincorporating some of the research and information that has been gathered, and really figuring out like how we can leverage that work that's already been done and provide more input to the broader PPDC. I'm still learning how this group and the PPDC works, so we're just getting back into it. But if there are comments, we can certainly take them for consideration. And then I suppose we have to vote on the charge questions, but I'll let Jeffrey actually run the details.
Thank you. Jeffrey, was this the last slide?
I believe so. Give me a second.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. So Jeffrey, you want to continue in terms of open the discussion?
Yep, we can have the open discussion with members now. Please raise your hand if you have anything to add. Yes, Nathan.
Great. Well, thanks for presenting that, Amelia. You did a wonderful job as always. And, I just want to say that it sucks to have to change charge questions in the middle of a work group. Especially since the charge questions are objectively worse than what they once were. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. So, but I think this group has done a good job of pivoting. Elections have consequences and we all have to adapt. But, I want to recognize a more immediate threat that many farm workers are facing right now. And before I say anything more, I want to be clear, although I'm a part of this work group, what I'm about to say is my own opinion and does not necessarily reflect the views of anyone else on this work group or in this committee for that matter. So, what I want to say is that the utter disdain for human life that the so-called leaders in this administration are effectuating with regards to immigration policy is nothing short of evil. And there is a callousness in decision-making right now that I have never seen before in my lifetime. And I wish it were unprecedented, but unfortunately we've seen it for much of our country's ugly racist history. But I really just want to say that in a business-focused administration, businesses have a voice right now when many others don't. And businesses and agricultural interests have a responsibility, I think, to push back on the basest instincts of a morally corrupt administration for the good of the farm workers that prop up your entire industry and who put food on the table of every single person in this country. They're not political pawns. They are people with families who just want to live and contribute to this society. And surely a nation of immigrants can understand this. But it's going to take those with a voice to speak up. And I'm hoping that the companies and the farm organizations represented here can help make the case for compassion over hate, because I can't think of anything else that is needed more right now. So for what it's worth, that's all.
Yes, thank you. And the last part that I did wanted to add is that, you know, when COVID started, it was a very much surprise for us. We were called essential workers. And we always questioned why we were never treated as essential. But nonetheless, we knew all along that we have been essential, because we know that by working the land, cultivating it, and making sure that there's food on people's tables is something that we all need to have to be able to survive. At the same time, if you have workers that are in a place, in a workplace, and you're providing a healthy environment and a secure environment, you will have a better production. I know that. I lived it, my family lived it, many relatives that we have lived it. And we know that when we were ill, we could not produce the same. And this is so ironic in terms of everything that's going on, but at least we want to make sure that and the reason why this group was formed was to still have a voice and be able to contribute as much, representing the farm worker community. So thank you very much. I don't know if anybody else from the group wanted to say anything, or we don't have any more time, Jeffrey.
No, Joe, you have time. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
So I'll just add on to what others have already said.
Little muffled.
Joe, we can't hear you. We can't hear you right. I don't know what happened.
All right, that should be a little bit better. Is
Yes,
that better?
thank you.
Okay,
Just
sorry
higher?
about that. So I wanted to provide a concrete example that helps people on the PPDC, kind of understand how farm workers, and when I say farm workers, I mean anybody who's working on farms, whether they're Latino farm workers or Native American farm workers or African American farm workers, right? So anybody who works on farms, on how they're sometimes caught sort of at the intersection of different places that isn't easily covered. So for example, the worker protection standard requires a no reentry sign as based on the label, that every pesticide application has their label that goes through registration and review, and one part of that label is what is the reentry interval before when the pesticide is applied and when workers can go in. Well, something as straightforward as that gets really complicated in field environments. So, people on the call are probably familiar with different parts of the country, but right now I'm in the middle of Iowa. My mom is in a hospital, so that's why I'm kind of keeping my voice down, but my mom is in a hospital and there is hundreds, if not thousands of acres of corn and soybeans. And so you ask yourself the question, well, when does the re-entry interval begin? If I enter a field, so let's just call it a 5,000 acre field or a 5,000 acre plot of land, does the re-entry interval begin when I apply the first acre's worth of pesticides or the last acre of pesticides, acre 4,999? Because right now there isn't guidance on when you should do that. And so there's all sorts of ideas out there in from one state to the other about how they calculate what the reentry interval is when it takes hours to apply those pesticides. And so that's where farm workers get caught in the middle, because something gets applied and perhaps they're going in too early or too late, depending on when or where the spraying began at any given time. I just give that simple, concrete example that says, the regulations where the label is the law isn't necessarily crystal clear for implementation. And so it creates substantial opportunity for the label not to be followed either accidentally or perniciously, depending on who's serving that. So it's these kinds of challenges that this work group is trying to take on and provide guidance for, so that in the spirit of cooperative federalism, there can be sufficient latitude from one state or one jurisdiction to the other to be able to do what they need to, but also sufficient consistency so that when somebody posts the reentry interval, it actually means what the reentry interval is supposed to mean. So I just offer that as an example to help people see some of the concrete things that the farm worker community or that they're trying to help get squared away in this group.
Thank you, Joe. Mark, really quick.
Yes, really quick. I do want to add in that it appears that the office has gotten rid of their efforts on IPM in education and diffusion of IPM with the erroneous thought that it's already diffused. But the reason I bring that up is that IPM is the best way to prevent pesticide resistance. And increased pesticide resistance, it puts farm workers at risk because there's more applications and there's more applications of older pesticides. So I just think that needs to be factored in somewhere. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just to add this, and I know Jeffrey, you said it's about time. Just to add, because there, and we all know, the ones that we are more conscious about this, climate has changed so much to the point that there's I think there's still investigation that's needed about, or research that's needed about in what way or how sooner or not, or how longer the pesticide, the toxic, the chemical gets discomposed from when you spray it to it being dissolved, because there's a difference. And in what way now, because of the heat, in most cases, during especially during this time, is the chemical going to create much more issues. It's not only what's it called? It's not only uh, the stress. What's it called? The heat stress. In Spanish, I'm thinking Spanish and trying to translate. Sorry. The heat stress. It's not only that. It's about, in what way it the chemical also carries more in terms of creates more issues to the body when all that is happening. So it's all of these things are still unseen, and unresolved, or not even looked at this point in time. So, but those are the two charge questions at this point.
Yes, we can go ahead and vote on these then. Give me a second. I can't see this. Yes, let's vote on these two charge questions. If you wouldn't mind raising your hand if you approve. Keep them up. $24. $24. Great. That works. Thank you, Mealy.
Thank you.
We can move on to our next session. Give me a second. Yes, so our next session will be the cross-sector work group priorities, which will be co-chaired by Joe Griebach from San Jose State University and Liz Lazard, Deputy Office Director for Programs. They will be presenting draft charge questions. Joe, do you need me to
Yes,
share your
please.
slides? Or okay, give me a second.
If you could.
Yep, I will. 1 second.
And while we're bringing those forward,
Mhm.
again, I'm just going to apologize in advance to people. I'm trying to be as project my voice as much as I can, but I am in a public space, and so I also don't want to be shouting. So if my sound is not coming through very well, please let me know. I also want to apologize in advance to the committee, in part because these slides have been developed sort of asynchronously in between events that they're probably not as finalized as what people would like. So I'm just going to apologize for those things up front. But if you could advance the slide, please, Jeffrey. I wanted to set the context for what this new work group was all about. And you might recall last November, it was pretty much at the end of the meeting, I had put forward the possibility that at the time there was some concern, not concern, following the election, and the installment, there was some concern that there might be ongoing budget constraints and possible understaffing that could follow with the new administration. And so the original vision and idea behind this work group was essentially to say, hey, can we get individuals from multiple stakeholder groups, multiple organizations, to try to find some consensus, and we're going to have to talk a little bit about what that means, but can we, try to find some consensus regarding what can help the Office of Pesticide Programs identify and stick to some priorities. Now, clearly, those are going to be within the priorities of the administration and the director, right? So these are not must-dos, but these are things where essentially everybody can, or at least as many people as possible, can agree on, hey, we all think that these are high priority issues. So I made that motion, Bob Mann seconded it, and then, there was a 24 count in favor of that. And the agreement when we left that meeting was fundamentally between that installment and then this meeting that we would be presenting charge questions that the committee can then vote on to determine whether or not this group should move forward. So that's where we are going with this presentation. Next slide, please. This slide is intended to give you both a visual as well as a list of the current membership on the committee. Part of the reason why I said we have to, kind of understand what consensus really means is clearly consensus is going to be driven by the absolute N, right? I'm a researcher, and so wherever the law of large numbers is, that's going to pretty much tell you the direction that decision making is going to go. And so that's why the pie chart that's in the lower left-hand corner tries to break out sort of what groups, what stakeholder groups are being represented. And clearly, trade organizations and registrants, numerically speaking, make up the single largest portion of our group. So that's part of the reason why we have to get a clear idea of what we mean by consensus. But nevertheless, we've got nice representation from different constituent groups trying to come to agreement on what some potential priority areas might be. Next slide, please. This is a place where that hiccup that I was telling you about it's not as polished as I would like. We haven't given you any context here, for example, and here it says more context. But one of the things that our group has already come to recognize is many of the stakeholders who are represented on the cross-sector work group really understands their sector and the part that they know and value very well, but they don't really understand how wide and complex the mandate is of the Office of Pesticide Programs. And so this is really here to help remind everybody on the PPDC that the Office of Pesticide Program, of course, does pesticide evaluation, registration, and reevaluation, a lot of the things that Ed talked about during his opening remarks. But another part that they're also responsible for is occupational and environmental safety. That's more than just what does the label say. But then in addition to that, they also have responsibility for residue tolerances and food safety, for enforcement and compliance at the state lead, with working with state lead agencies. They're also responsible for engaging in public and stakeholder engagement. And then lastly, promoting safer technologies out in the field. Now that's what they do as part of their everyday book of business, for lack of a better word. But then on top of that, they also have a wide variety of other work, like the persistent backlog, that it's getting smaller, so that's the good news, but nevertheless, there still is a persistent backlog. They also have all the court-approved settlements and court-approved actions that they need to be working on. And then they also are responsible for continuing to implement several outstanding Office of Inspector General and Government Accounting Organization recommendations. So the point is that they've got a large foray of work that needs to be done. And any one of us from any given stakeholder group, of course, prioritizes the things that are important to our stakeholders. And so that kind of creates this vision, if you will, of a bunch of kids hanging around mom's skirt. Since I'm taking care of my aging mother, I'll use that example, right? You can imagine 4 or 5 kids hanging around mom saying, "Mama, I want, Mama, I want, Mama, you should, Mama, you should." And that leaves Mama, in this case, the Office of Pesticide Program, trying to decide which kid they're going to give attention to. So the spirit of this work group is trying to get some of the kids, if you will, that would be the different stakeholder groups, to maybe come to some agreements on what can we all agree on that can help the Office of Pesticide Programs work on some of its priorities. Next slide, please. So here's what we've been working on so far. We've had 5 one-hour virtual meetings. So, after the installment of the new administration, it took us a little while to get started. So we've had 5 one-hour meetings. We've harvested a bunch of existing resources to kind of educate our work group around the areas of work that OPP engages in. And that's some of the things, these are just examples of things that we've looked at and tried to make just a little bit of sense of. And we've been working on formulating some charge questions and starting to thinking about our methods for how we might actually go about answering the charge questions if the committee agrees with the charge questions that we're putting forward. So that's the work that we've done over the course of the roughly last 2 or 3 months. Next slide, please. Here's another place where it's less seamless than I would have hoped for a presentation. Originally, this slide was in its place was a slide that Ed had presented at the last meeting that basically showed the change after PREA 5 in the government allocations, and frankly how short the government allocations were falling. I'm going to borrow from Terry Kipley, and Terry, if I get this wrong, you can call me to task when we open it up for discussion. But I've heard him say that the government has been short in giving EPA about $32 million per year, because that's part of what industry signed on. But yet those allocations have not been coming in from the congressional appropriations. That was the original slide that was in this place. I'm presuming that the slide that's here is intended to tell some other story. I'm not exactly sure what that story is. Again, I'll defer that to Ed or others to explain what this slide is for when we come to the open discussion. But if we can move on to the next slide, I think that's going to bring us up to the charge questions. Yes, thank you, Jeffrey. So what we wanted to try to do in these slides is to both give a charge question. So in this case, the first charge question that we came to agreement on as far as a possibility for the PPDC to consider is first, what resource allocations could OPP consider to improve the protection of human health and the environment across the major activities that it engages in? That is registration review, attending to worker safety, making sure that the environment is protected, specifically the Endangered Species Act, or being in compliance or supporting the Endangered Species Act, and then all of the technical assistance, granting, and other non-regulatory work that it engages in. That's referring back to that more context slide. That's what that was referring to, is to help us remember they've got a lot of work that's on their plate, and we want to be able to help Ed and his group think of alternative strategies with the goal of being able to identify optimal resource allocations for pesticide regulation to promote the economic vitality without compromising OPP's mission of protecting human health and in the environment. Sometimes efficiency is code for doing it cheaper. We don't want to do it cheaper. We want to do it as best as we can in the most cost-effective fashion that we can. So that's our first proposed charge question, is what resource allocation strategies could OPP consider to improve protection of human health and the environment across all the areas that the Office of Pesticide Programs does work in? Next slide, please, Jeffrey. The next charge question that we are proposing is, what feedback or observations can the work group share to help the Office of Pesticide Program enhance the cost effectiveness of its various resources, including the very talented scientists and staff that the Office of Pesticide Programs has? Some of the tea leaf reading that you might see in this particular slide that we want to call out is, it's wonderful to hear that there's the possibility of additional staff coming in to help clean up the backlog. We also, though, want to make sure that that staff is not being diverted from other important activities that are relevant to PREA and FICPA and FIFRA. So part of it is to make sure that all of the resources are being optimized to see to it that all of the missional elements are being attended to, rather than sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul, if you will. And again, the goal here is to identify and prioritize possible strategies to improve the cost effectiveness of the Office of Pesticide Programs, again, in achieving its mission. We're trying to maintain a very missional focus, and at the end of the day, the Office of Pesticide Programs is here to first protect the health of human beings and the environment through its fundamental task of regulating pesticide use. And that brings us then to the last question. And that is, what are good examples of and best practice strategies for forward-thinking partnerships and strong cooperative federalism that the Office of Pesticide Programs could emulate? I'm not going to read the rest of this slide because it basically helps you see how we're defining what we mean by strong cooperative federalism, to see to it that that just doesn't kind of come down to, just simple state federal partnerships, because in some cases that might be where some of the problems are coming in. But at the same time, we do need to recognize that that's the system that we are operating in, and we do want that to work effectively. And likewise, you also see what we mean by partnerships, and in terms of when we talk about forward-thinking partnerships. Again, the goal is to be able to identify and prioritize some recommendations for the Office of Pesticide Programs to cultivate some of these high-impact partnerships with non-EPA entities in protecting human health and the environment by regulating pesticide use. One last element with regard to this proposed charge question that we need to remain cognizant of is many of the EPA's federal partners, such as the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, which helps support the sensor program for keeping track of acute pesticide poisonings in the workplace, or some of the work that's currently being done by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as part of the Endangered Species Act. Each of those is currently under, shall we say, realignment in terms of their funding portfolio and their staffing portfolios. It's entirely possible, at least as of today, that the sensor program will go away. And so that means whatever the Office of Pesticide Programs has been relying on with regard to keeping track of acute pesticide poisonings in the field, that partnership may go away if the sensor program goes away as part of the NIOSH proposed budget cuts and streamlining. So part of this identifying and prioritizing high impact partnerships is also being able to recognize that some of the federal partners that we've been working with historically may not be partners in the future, depending on what the current administration decides to do with some of those partnerships. Next slide, please. The last
Joe,
slide.
I think that's it.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So there was one last slide, but another one of those things. So we will now bring it to full discussion because apparently the method slide has been taken out.
Yep, we can go into full discussion. Please raise your hands.
And thanks, Joe, for presenting, given where you are. And you have my thoughts.
Mark Lame.
One of the challenges of this work group, well, there's a number of them. First of all, periodically the PPDC or AFACA needs to look again at what is going on so we can provide the best advice. So some of this is repetitive and some of it's not, but it'll give us a fresh look. And I know that one of the things that Joe couldn't present on the methods was we need to get some good baseline data with regard to what are the appropriations and what is going on. But there are two other things. I don't think I've ever been on a work group where we've really asked questions about what's going on in the regions. And the regions implement, and the headquarters theoretically comes up with policy, and then the regions theoretically implement it. But it's not successful unless it's successfully implemented. So that would be something that would be interesting to look at. And it's a tough one. It's a tough one for headquarters to be messing with regions, and so I get that. But nonetheless, if it's not implemented, it doesn't work. And that gets to the other problem, which is this strong cooperative federalism. And I did a bit of work on that towards the end of my research career. Cooperative federalism, has some good things about it, but it also has some really bad things about it. And there's this dichotomy between the states and the feds. And the reason that the feds are there is to make sure the laws of the United States are in fact enacted properly. And the states have a lot of incentives to game the system. And that's not saying anything bad about state folks. I was one myself. But I'm just saying, when the governor and the legislature in a state want a certain thing, it's more difficult. Typically the feds have have a freer hand on that. I don't know if it's going to be that way in the future, but I will say that those are some challenges I see going forward with these. Nonetheless, I think they're good charge questions.
Anyone else? Nathan.
Thanks for that presentation, Joe. It's great to see how this work group is forming. I don't have much to say other than, this proposed charge question number 3 worries me a little bit, because obviously as publicly available, publicly funded resources like Sensor may go away, I'm worried about those resources being replaced with resources that are proprietary or confidential business information. On the science side of things, we see this all the time at OPP, and it's frustrating to say the least. So I would say, as you're working on this charge question, I hope this work group really prioritizes publicly available, transparent resources and partnerships, because if it's not that, then it's garbage as far as I'm concerned. So thank you.
Well said, Nathan. Thanks for that excellent comment.
Anyone else? Should we go into voting for the charge questions? Okay. So yes, we would like to open it up for a vote. If you agree with these charge questions, please raise your hand and leave them up. Keep leaving them up. Great, 29. Thank you. So we do have some time before our next session at 3:20. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Joe, before we? Okay, thank you.
I would just like to add
Oh,
my
sorry,
thanks to Joe for his wonderful help and guidance and leadership on this committee. I was new to OPP when we started, and it's been a great experience. And thank you so much. And as I'll echo what Ed said, with I know everything that you have on your plate. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Great. We can, our next session is at 3:20, so please return a few minutes before then, and we can break for a little bit. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.